Good afternoon. My name is Sarah, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to a deeper look at our Grantmaking Equity Conference Call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. I would now like to turn the conference over to Judith Bell, Vice President of Programs at the San Francisco Foundation. Please go ahead, Judith.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us. As you heard, I'm Judith Bell, and I want to start by giving you a sense of how we will spend the time on this call. I'm very mindful that all of you want to be able to report back to your development teams, to your boards, and to others about the specifics of our grant-making strategy to advance racial and economic equity across the region. In our first call back in June, we gave a high-level view, and on this call we're going to dive deeper and provide you with up-to-date information on our grant-making strategy. And just to note, that first call is available on our website if folks want to go back to it. I'm here today with Kay Fernandez-Smith, our new Assistant Vice President of Programs at the Foundation, along with the directors of our 3 Pathways to Equity. Francesca Vitor, the Director of our People Pathway, Expanding Access to Opportunity. Landon Williams, the Director of our Place Pathway, Anchoring Communities. And Myra Chow, the Director of our Power Pathway, Nurturing Equity Movement. I'll talk briefly to provide some framing, giving you a sense of how we got here and what we hope to achieve, and then I'll turn it over to the program directors and to Kay to go into the specifics of what we hope to accomplish with grantee partners in the Bay Area. We will save time at the end of the call to answer questions, and we've already received some questions leading up to the call, but please email questions, which we'll be monitoring during the call, to vpprograms@sff.org. And again, that's vpprograms@sff.org. Now let me give you a sense of the context and an overview of our equity agenda. Throughout our history, the San Francisco Foundation has been firmly committed to serving the people of our region. The diversity of our people and our communities have been a critical asset for the Bay Area, for our quality of life, and for the strength of our economy. Now we're at a critical crossroads. At the same time that our region has experienced a lot of growth and increase in wealth, we have seen widening inequality. And in fact, we're number 2 in the nation in terms of the amount of inequality in our region. Basically, the rising tide has not lifted all boats. And this has been especially true for people working low-wage jobs and people of color who have too often been left behind. As we described to you on our previous call, we reached out and connected with community, civic, business, and elected leaders from across the region. We reviewed data, and we listened to your views on the opportunities and the challenges we are facing and the roles that we at the San Francisco Foundation could play to make the region a stronger and more equitable place for everyone. In July, we announced our deepening commitment to expand opportunity and inclusion for struggling communities and people of color across the Bay Area. We've always had a regional footprint. Now we have a regional agenda. We have been committed to social justice. Now we are building upon that history with our agenda to advance greater racial and economic equity. Across the region, we need to ensure that everyone has a chance to get a good job, live in a safe and affordable home, has a strong political voice, and can live in a community that provides real access to opportunity. This is the vision of our equity agenda and what we aim to achieve by supporting people, place, and power. Our programmatic work, including our initiatives and projects, is now aligned under these 3 equity pathways. Now I'd like to talk more about the people, place, and power pathways and our grant making. We know how important it is to listen and to learn, so we spend time engaging grantees and partners to get feedback about the Foundation's programs and our grant-making process. We heard that as we focus our work on advancing racial and economic equity in the region, we need to exercise our leadership differently, to partner, to speak out, and to support our grantees in different ways. We heard that there was a need for more integrated approaches and that our grants needed to be bigger and that we should make more multi-year grants and provide core support grants to allow grantees to strategically plan, to do the work that is longer term, and implement programs and projects that may not yield results in 1 year. In early July, we announced over $5 million in initial equity-focused grants. These first grants were designed to launch our equity agenda. They were emblematic of the kinds of grants we plan on making in the future. The average grant size was bigger. We went from average grants of about $30,000 to an average of about $80,000. There were many multi-year grants, and most of the grants were focused on core support for organizations committed to advancing equity. While we believe that this is a better strategy, it also means that we will be reducing the overall number of grants that we make. To avoid confusion with the grant-making program I'm about to describe, I want to also mention that included in the initial $5 million in grants toward our equity strategy was support for focused campaigns. For example, the $5 million in grants included a number of grants connected to the $580 million Alameda County housing bond. Our grants helped with the initial steps to develop and get the bond approved for the November ballot, and we will continue to support that effort and are actually in the process of moving some grants to support Get Out the Vote and other campaign-related activities. These grants are separate from the open application process that we are discussing today. So now let me get to those upcoming opportunities. In November, we will issue new grant guidelines. We'll hold another call to give you additional details and answer questions at that point. In January, we'll begin to accept letters of intent under one common grant application. This will be an open door to a suite of equity-focused opportunities, including grants from each of our pathways and from an overarching pool for innovation and support for smaller or new organizations. You'll be able to request support across different pathways if that seems appropriate for your work. An internal grants review committee will determine the organizations that will be invited to submit full proposals. Those invited to submit proposals will also be notified which pathway their grant opportunity will be primarily connected to, and will also be connected to a foundation staff person. We know that part of this process is about building relationships, so we want to make sure that we help you build and maintain connections to our staff. Moreover, with the restructuring of our program department to reflect our equity agenda, there are new staff to get to know and to work with. Once the proposals have been submitted, they will be reviewed, and final decisions will be made. We expect to issue grant funds in May. So that's the basics. One equity-focused grant application, open in January for letters of intent, then request for full proposals coming in early spring. Final decisions and the release of funds happening in May. So at this point, let me turn it over to Francesca Vitor to share more about the Expanding Access to Opportunity pathway, or in shorter terms, the PEOPLE pathway.
Thank you so much, Judith. My name is Francesca Vitor, and I'm the Director of the Expanding Access to Opportunity pathway. The Expanding Access to Opportunity, or the PEOPLE pathway, supports the belief that everybody deserves a good job so that they can afford to pay their bills, stay in their homes, and not have to struggle to make ends meet. As the economy has improved across the region, not everyone has benefited from the economic gains and growth. Increasingly, people of color and those that are earning low wages are shut out of opportunities, and many face multiple barriers to accessing a good job or a home they can afford. To make matters worse, commutes from home to work are getting longer as people are forced to find affordable homes further away from where job opportunities are. People are spending a lot more time in their cars or on the bus, getting to work, decreasing the time they have with family and with friends. The Foundation supports efforts that expand people's access to opportunities, as well as initiatives to remove the systemic barriers that block people from being able to take advantage of the economic opportunities in our region. We want to partner and make investments that focus on the interrelated areas of job creation and training and housing and transit, as well as ways to improve our broken education and criminal justice systems. Let me share what we hope to accomplish in this pathway and the grant-making strategies we will support to get there. 1.1 million new jobs will be coming to the region by 2040. The Foundation is supporting efforts to make sure that those jobs are available to people of color and to people that are struggling to make ends meet. We also recognize that immigrants, youth, people re-entering the workforce after incarceration, and the unemployed and underemployed need targeted interventions and supports to have a chance at a brighter future and to reach their full potential. Our key strategies include supporting state and local policy and advocacy that promote job opportunities and a living wage, efforts to improve our public transit system so that people can move easily to and from work, overall systems change, as well as strategic interventions where our current systems are failing us, and advancing projects that hold the potential to reduce racial strife and advance racial equity. Let me talk more specifically about how we will approach this through a focus on jobs, transit, and systems change. We will support strategies that help people get high-quality, living wage jobs, build career ladders, and develop social enterprises. We will support job programs that not only prepare our region for climate change and population growth, but make sure that everyone benefits and that we leverage and target the huge amount of public dollars coming from the region and the state to make sure that communities are not left behind. We will take advantage of the many job opportunities that the clean energy economy and new infrastructure construction will provide to ensure that people of color and those earning low wages are trained for and can access the jobs of the future. In our focus on transit systems, we know that housing located near transit can help the environment and make a big difference in individual and families' budgets. Too often, housing and transit take up so much of our monthly budgets that little is left over for all the other essentials. Therefore, we will support efforts to make transit and housing more affordable and ensure that they are connecting people to good job opportunities. We will seek to leverage public funding for transit to improve our infrastructure from both a planning and equity perspective and to better connect low-wage workers to jobs. We also believe that if we can help remove the barriers to opportunity, specifically in the education and criminal justice systems, we can build better pathways to a quality job. So we will look for creative and innovative projects that will help young people develop into successful adults, employ people re-entering the workforce from the justice system, and help our immigrant communities and communities of color connect to real opportunity throughout the Bay Area. Regarding grants for housing work, we know that we are in a housing crisis in the Bay Area. We heard loud and clear from our community partners that we need to address the housing crisis and that we need all hands on deck. While Landon Williams and the PLACE team will be leading the affordable housing work, the People Pathway will help identify state and regional policies and investment opportunities to build more affordable housing, especially near transit. In conclusion, the People Pathway will advance racial and economic equity by supporting efforts that create job opportunities for residents with the greatest barriers to employment, increase the availability of high-quality, affordable housing near transit and accessible to jobs, and remove barriers to jobs by improving the education and criminal justice systems. We will use this first open cycle in January of the new equity strategy to further develop our outcomes and strategies and to learn from our grant partners on how best to expand access to opportunity and remove systemic barriers. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague Landon to discuss our second pathway, PLACE.
Thank you, Francesca. Hello, everybody. I'm Landon Williams, and I'm the director of the PLACE pathway, which is focused on advancing community. The PLACE pathway works with our community partners, local governments, and others to retain the vibrant cultural and ethnic character of the San Francisco Bay Area. We want to continue to have the Bay Area recognized as a region that is welcoming, that is a place where vastly diverse communities see themselves represented in the arts, culture, and civic life of their neighborhoods and where they can thrive. This is the vision, and as we're all aware, the Bay Area continues to experience unprecedented growth. residents and commercial rents are skyrocketing, and longtime residents and the nonprofit organizations that serve them are challenged to remain in their current locations. A recent study of residential displacement projects that in the next 5 to 10 years, as many as 300,000 families that represent 600 to 1 million people will be forced to move out of the Bay Area. Those most at risk of displacement are people earning low wages and people of color. As you heard from Francesca, the issue of housing requires us to tackle this from multiple directions. While Francesca's work in the People Pathway is focused on regional and statewide policy, the Place Pathway will focus on community-specific approaches to things like increasing the supply of affordable housing, that's production, stabilizing existing affordable housing, that's housing preservation, and work to keep current residents in their homes for protection. To intervene in this displacement trajectory, our funding priorities in the Place Pathway are focused on 5 strategies. The first strategy is to increase the production of new affordable housing. This is imperative, that we support efforts to increase the supply of affordable housing. While this is not a panacea by itself, however, when we look at the trends, we see that cities and counties across the Bay Area have underproduced affordable housing for decades. So how can people feel a sense of belonging if they cannot live or afford to live in their communities? This is an essential factor in our equation to support a sense of belonging. The second strategy is to stabilize existing affordable housing. Many affordable apartments were built with rent restrictions, but these are now expiring, and others are in need of rehabilitation or require different financing if they are to remain affordable. There is an aggressive trend in our region to purchase these affordable homes and convert them to market rate. Since those living in those homes can't afford the market rent, current tenants must leave. And given the current housing market, many find it difficult to locate a new home that they can afford. We aim to partner with groups to stem the tide of tenants being evicted so that they are not forced to relocate to places away from their friends, their neighbors, schools, and the social supports vital to their well-being. The third strategy is to advance measures that keep current tenants in their existing homes. It is less expensive to keep people in their current affordable housing than it is to build new housing for them. Organizations and activities to advance strategies for rent control and just cause eviction protections will be in this area for funding. Our fourth strategy is to stabilize community anchors. Community anchors such as arts and cultural centers, schools, neighborhood centers, and faith-based organizations help make our neighborhoods welcoming places. We need to invest in efforts that stabilize and strengthen local arts and cultural organizations and that encourage them to join with community groups and residents to produce art and engage in cultural activities that highlight community connections. The sights and sounds of culture echoing through communities can create a sense of belonging for all. Finally, our fifth place-informed strategy is to stabilize small businesses and organizations that provide local jobs, goods, and services in their communities. These small businesses range from not-for-profit service providers to small mom-and-pop stores and businesses. In places like Chinatown, for instance, they define the cultural character of the neighborhood. In East and West Oakland, they sell the basics, that's the food, and they provide the services. And they are the social service organizations where residents can go to improve their computer skills and to help themselves gain skills needed to enter the workforce. They are also the youth centers and training sites where youth with high potential but low opportunity find the encouragement, skills, and motivation that last a lifetime. We believe that this combination of strategies will help the Bay Area retain its cultural vitality and the diverse communities in the neighborhood that are the essence of our region. I look forward to reading applications in the open cycle that are related to these 5 place-informed strategies and partnering with you all to advance this work. Now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Myra, who will provide an overview of the 3rd equity pathway, Nurturing Equity Movements.
Thank you, Landon. I'm Myra Chow, and I'm excited to share our plans to support movement building and how our work also supports our people-focused and place-informed pathways. We all know that movements are forcing conversations on race, justice, and equity. And now, more than ever, we need to build power to ensure a strong political and community voice for all. And as we know, I'd like to share what we hope to accomplish in this pathway, the funding strategies to get there, and upcoming grant opportunities. As we all know, it's challenging to build community power, but it is critical to achieving racial and economic equity. Throughout our community listening sessions, what we heard from people is that they want the foundation to continue to build upon our long history of work with all of you to promote social justice in the region. The vision we share is of a Bay Area where community residents lead the change, develop the solutions, and decide what's best, not just for themselves and their families, but as a community. People want to influence the institutions that shape their lives, their schools, the police, public health, and public work departments, and so on. They want to be heard by these institutions and represented within them. So what we want to do is strengthen and develop new leadership, improve the region's community organizing capacity, and bolster organizations and networks to build the influence needed to make change happen. While we want to win anti-displacement measures in the upcoming election, the focus of the Power Pathway is to build community power for the long run and on the equity issues of the day. Right now, one of the most pressing challenges facing communities is displacement. By supporting movement building and community leadership, over time and in the years ahead, the community will continue to define what the equity agenda will be. Through the Power Pathway, the Foundation will support these efforts by funding 5 aspects of movement building. The first is community organizing and advocacy with communities of color and with people earning low wages. The second is strengthening coalitions and alliances that promote racial and economic equity. The third is civic engagement, specifically voter engagement, to win equity campaigns and elect forward-thinking leaders. The fourth is leadership development of low-wage workers and communities of color to serve in positions of power as elected officials, on boards and commissions, and in community leadership roles. And lastly, the fifth is data, research, and communications that support movement building. I'm excited to say there will be 3 grant opportunities in the Power Pathway that will be part of the open cycle that Judith described. The first will support 2 strategies that are core to building community power: community organizing and advocacy, and strengthening of coalitions and alliances that aggregate and multiply community power across different neighborhoods in the 5 Bay Area counties, across a wide array of racial and ethnic groups, and across issue areas such as economic and environmental justice and immigration and criminal justice reform. The second opportunity in support of movement building is a new rapid response fund for grants up to $15,000 to respond in a timely way to present-day events that advance or defend racial and economic equity in the Bay Area. For example, we could support organizers who are convening community members in the midst of a crisis by providing funding for meeting spaces or facilitators. Rapid response grants will become available early next year with the guidelines and applications posted in January. The third opportunity applies to congregations or faith-based organizations. Through our Faiths program, we will make small grants that increase civic and cultural participation, promote economic and racial equity, or provide community services to low-income residents. We are looking forward to working with you and supporting your efforts to build community power. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kay.
Thanks, Myra. We're almost at the end of our presentation portion of the call, so I want to remind you to submit your questions to vpprograms@sff.org. That's vpprograms@sff.org. We're receiving those emails as we speak and hope to answer them during the Q&A period shortly. I'm going to talk about one more grant opportunity that will be available during this open cycle in January, and then wrap up our presentations with more detail about the two-step process for the open grants and a general timeline for you to be aware of. In addition to the Equity Pathway grant opportunities that Francesca, Landon, and Myra spoke about, and as part of the same open cycle and timeline, we plan on awarding grants to support new and/or innovative approaches to advancing racial and economic equity. The Foundation has had a history of seeding new coalitions, programs, and organizations, and this will continue that legacy. These grants will support smaller organizations whose operating budget is $1 million or less. So let's move on to the next steps and what you can expect in this open grant-making cycle. In November, we'll issue new grant guidelines that will provide more details about the equity pathway strategies you heard about today and the innovation grants. We will hold another teleconference just like this one to complement the written guidelines and to give you additional details and answer questions you may have. Then in January 2017, we'll accept letters of intent under one common application. This is meant to be a short 1- to 2-page document communicating what your organization is working on and how it aligns with our equity strategy. This will be an open door to the suite of equity-focused opportunities, including grants from each of our pathways and from the innovation grants that I shared earlier. You might be thinking, it's challenging to know which pathway or grant opportunity to apply to. We get that. We want to make it easier for you to apply because the people, place, and power equity work are so interrelated. Therefore, when you submit an LOI, an internal grants review committee across the 3 pathways will review your LOI together so that we can identify whether your work seems best aligned with the people, place, and/or power strategies. For those that submitted the January LOI, we'll inform organizations of several things by February. Number 1, you'll know whether your LOI meets our grant guidelines, and as a result, you'll be encouraged to submit a full proposal in March. Second, you'll also be notified which equity pathway or grant opportunity your full proposal fits under. And third, you'll be partnered with your program contact at the Foundation. We know that part of the process is about building relationships, as Judith mentioned. We want to make sure that we help you build and maintain connections to our staff. And with the restructuring of our program department to reflect our equity agenda, there's new staff to get to know and to work with. So we promise to help make those connections moving forward. Once the full grant proposals have been submitted in March, they will be reviewed and staff will conduct due diligence. Final decisions will be made in April, and we expect to administer the grant funds in May. I'll turn it back to Judith now to respond to your questions.
Great. Thanks, Kay. And thanks to all of you already submitting questions. It's terrific. We will do our best to answer all of these, and just to know in advance, if we don't get to your question, we will post it later on our website. And also, so you know, we are recording this call, and that will also be posted on our website, so you can go back or send it out to other folks who you want to be informed about our grant-making strategy. So let's dig in. Just before we go, just one more reminder that you can send your questions to vpprograms@sff.org. So the first question is, can proposals touch each of the 3 areas, people, place, and power, if what we're working on is multifaceted? or do you recommend focusing on one of the three areas? We are completely open to your proposals touching on each of the three areas, and we do not want you to try to reconfigure your work to just touch on one of the pathways. That's one of the reasons that we're having this open door where you can indicate that your work touches on multiple pathways. Then we received a question about whether or not we would support scholarships, and the answer to that is we will not. The foundation will not be including that as part of our grant-making efforts. And then we also received a question, what are the three emphases for the FAITH grant? They were stated too quickly, and what is the deadline for letters of intent in January? So two things to know. One is we'll be posting the exact deadline for the letters of intent when we post the guidelines in November. And since you've signed up for this call, you will get an email both about the next teleconference around the guidelines as well as around all the deadlines tied to the letters of intent and to the other steps. And I'm going to turn it over to Myra to answer the question about the FAITH grants.
Okay, my New Yorker, I was talking too fast. So the three are civic and cultural participation, promoting economic and racial equity, and providing community services to low-income residents.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, we also got a question about whether or not collaborative proposals are allowed, and yes, they are definitely allowed. There's another related question that I'll bring up right now, and that says, will there be a list of applicants so that smaller organizations can team up with larger ones to support regional efforts? And that is a terrific idea. We are going to think about it and potentially might do it associated with the call around the guidelines in November. So we'll get back to you on that. But we definitely want to see collaboration in these proposals and the work going forward. Then we have a question about whether or not we see youth development programming fitting in. And so the answer is yes, absolutely. We have a lot of desire to be engaged around youth. Some folks call it opportunity youth. Other folks talk about it in terms of youth who are not connected to the education system or to work. And so we definitely would like to see proposals in that regard. And then we have a question that's related to the information associated with our initial grantees. And the question says, while the initial grantees are a fantastic group of organizations, can you share how support for grassroots community-based organizations will fit into the Foundation's strategy? And can you describe what the Foundation considers an anchor institution? Great questions. For us, an anchor institution is, by definition, one that is very connected to community, has a longer-term history with the community, and has some scale associated with it. And the smaller grassroots community-based organizations will fit in specifically to the innovation grant pool that you heard Kay discussing, and will also be eligible for the other work associated with the pathways. Okay, and then there's a question about grants being by invitation only. And I want to be clear that for the equity application that we've been talking about that opens in January, all 501c3s are open to apply. After the letters of intent have been reviewed, then we will notify those who are eligible to submit a proposal. But for all three pathways, so including the people pathways. So People, Place, Power, and the Innovation Fund, all open to all 501c3s when the January letter of intent process opens up. If you are a current grantee, there's also a question here, you are welcome to apply. The process will be no different for a current grantee than for one who is new to the San Francisco Foundation. Let me ask the operator to open up the call for Ricardo Huerto Nino so that he can ask his question. Ricardo, are you there? Oh, Robbie. It appears like Robbie, operator, on screen.
Robbie's line is open.
Hello? Robbie or Ricardo, are you there? Okay, operator, why don't you switch us to Anel Aguayo?
Okay, Anel's line is open.
Anel, are you there?
Yes, hi. So I actually just submitted a question through the email, so you can ignore that one. I'll just ask what I sent. But it seems like there is a huge emphasis on creating new affordable housing and stabilizing current affordable housing in the form of multifamily units. And I was wondering how the San Francisco Foundation will support or is looking to support organizations that focus on preserving the current housing stock for low-income homeowners. Low-income homeowners have become the forgotten demographic, and their struggles are very real and also face the issue of displacement, forcing them to leave communities they have been a part of for decades. And so in the sense of my organization, we work to preserve the current housing stock as well as community facilities by rehabilitating the homes and community facilities of vulnerable populations. And I don't hear that there is much support for that.
Landon, are you still on? Can you want to answer that question?
Certainly. So a couple of ways that we support that. One is, and realize that this is partly what we did with the housing bonds. You'll see that in those housing bonds there are actually are programs that would support folks who are currently living in affordable housing. Moving forward, when we talked about our three strategies that focus on housing, and one of them was to preserve existing affordable housing. And that's through being able to work with organizations that are either themselves providing innovative resources that help the owners and managers of that property to refinance the property where needed to make repairs at a cost of capital that allows them to remain affordable. And then also working with those who are working in the public policy arena, such as what Francesca is doing to increase the supply of funding on the public sector that also helps to maintain that housing as affordable. I'm sorry if it didn't sound like it was an area of emphasis, but it definitely is.
Terrific. Thank you, Landon. Francesca, this question's for you. And the question is, in the area of education, is there more focus on policy advocacy versus direct services in schools?
There will be more of a focus on policy and advocacy, which doesn't mean we won't do any direct service. And we are looking at things like absenteeism and suspension rates and really some of these fundamental equity issues that will help young people stay in school and graduate and get jobs in advance and grow into successful adults. Things like restorative justice we are also looking at, which might be considered more of a service, but it's going to be more of an emphasis on really trying to fix the system and strategic interventions from a policy and advocacy perspective.
Terrific. Okay, we have a question here about whether or not these new grant-making priorities have been shared with those who maintain donor-advised funds with the Foundation, and if those donors are being encouraged to think about making contributions to nonprofits based on these newly defined areas of emphasis. And yes, we are in a fabulous process with our donors, talking with them about the equity strategy, having conversations about the possibilities for them if they choose to make grants and contributions associated with it. And we want to continue on that process with our donors as they make their own philanthropic decisions and go on their own philanthropic journeys. But it is very much a part of how our work is unfolding. And then we have a question about whether or not regranting programs to immigrants, low-income, and people of color will be supported and allowed. And the answer is yes. Those will be both supported and allowed, and details to come in the guidelines, but the answer is yes. And then can new organizations that do not have a 501c3 status apply with a fiscal agent or sponsor? And the answer to that is also yes. And as you heard Kay talk about, the Innovation Fund will actually be a great opportunity for those new and emerging organizations. And then we have 3 different questions here. The first is, it seems like health services and health education, health policy advocacy do not fit within this framework, and is that a correct understanding? We are more focused on the social determinants of health, those issues and circumstances that really impact a person's health but are ones that are not directly tied to health services. And so we expect that many of our grants will impact people's health, but will not necessarily be directly tied to health services. Then there is a question about whether or not we'll consider programs that build youth leadership, but may not necessarily be employment-focused. I'm going to ask Myra to answer that question.
Yes, in the leadership development work under the POWER pathway, we will look at leadership development of youth and a whole range of populations.
Great. And then we had a question that we received in advance about whether or not evaluation and metrics in final reports, whether that will change from what they've been in the past, and whether we'll be asking for more specific data and reporting than we have in the past. And the answer to that is yes, we will be changing the evaluation and metrics. We will be looking to align the kind of data and reporting that we're asking of you with what you are looking to achieve. And more details on that will come out with the guidelines and the additional information about our new program. Let's see. Then we have a question about the fact that we mentioned that our average grant size on the $5 million had been $80,000. And this says, is there a range on the proposal amounts and the upper limit? There will be a range, but we are actually still landing on exactly what those will be, so more to come, and we will provide that to you, but can't actually exactly answer that right now. And then in general, particularly for new approaches that are in the pilot stages, will we be supporting those or have less than a year of operating history? And the answer is
yes.
Yes, and Kay, I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that.
Yes, we really have had a history in the past, the Foundation, of supporting new approaches and seeding some new coalitions and projects. And so we hope through this innovation grant during the same open cycle that we'll be able to support those kinds of innovations and new approaches as well.
And then we got a question about whether or not we are going to fund organizations with budgets above $1 million, and the answer is yes. Just that we have this fund to make sure that we are also supporting smaller organizations. So we will definitely be supporting bigger organizations as well.
Particularly through the pathways.
Thank you. And then we have a question about whether or not performing arts is part of our pathway vision. And yes, performing arts are part of our pathway vision. We've actually had multiple discussions about how performing arts play into movement building and tower building. We expect to be supporting the arts in the context of the people, place, and power pathways. Then we have a question about what new strategies you anticipate immigration legal services to fall under the new pathways. And I'll turn it to Francesca to answer that.
Yes, immigration legal services would most likely come under the people pathway. Again, we're going to be more rigorous about outcomes, so it would really need to be in the context of expanding access to opportunity and most likely more specifically on accessing good jobs and more of an affordable life in the Bay Area.
And removing barriers as well.
Removing systemic barriers, which we know that the immigrant community is facing.
Then we have a question about whether or not you can submit more than one letter of intent. What we're going to try and do with our guidelines is to allow you to be able to submit one letter of intent. I don't think we'll be prohibiting more than one, but we want to encourage you to not have to do multiples in that process. You'll be able to make a better decision about that once the guidelines are posted. Then we got a question about people with disabilities and how we're integrating people with disabilities into our new grant direction, structure, program, and processes. And actually, this person starts off in their email to us pointing out how much disabilities disproportionately affect people of color and pointing out how people with disabilities are some of the poorest in the Bay Area. And that's exactly how we anticipate supporting people with disabilities in the context of the obstacles that they face, whether it's around housing or access to opportunities, and also in their effort to build power and build a stronger movement. And then we have a question about recent news about the 49ers supporting nonprofits who are working in support of racial equity and being engaged with the foundation in this regard. And the question is, will those funds go into the pool of available funds via this grant cycle, or are those funds being set aside for other purposes? We are working with the 49ers to figure out exactly how this process will unfold, and we will let you know as the answer to that becomes clearer. Then we have a question around whether or not multiple programs within a larger organization like the Public Health Institute, whether or not they can apply simultaneously, and the answer is definitely yes. You absolutely can. Those programs are quite distinct and really would only work for you to be applying separately. And then, Landon, this will be a question for you, just to give you a heads up. Are any of the housing programs geared towards certain populations? And would an organization that's focused, for instance, on the homeless be eligible to apply? Landon, you want to answer?
I'd say the latter question is yes, they would be able to apply. And in fact, some of the ones that we funded already have funds in them that are, if they're approved, these ballot measures have funds that will be allocated to the homeless. I think that, if whatever population the organization focuses on, if they have a need for housing, I think we're going to seriously take a look at it. So we may have an emphasis on people of color, low-income folks, but we're not going to say, because you are African American and you are low-income, yes, and if you happen to be Asian American and you're low-income, no. It's the populations that we're looking to serve. So I'd say across the board, if you're working with folks who are in need of housing, you should read our guidelines and then apply.
Okay. Thank you, Landon. We got a question about whether or not we'll be making multi-year grants or we'll only be issuing a single-year grant, and the answer is yes, we will be making multi-year grants as part of this new process. And then can we turn it over to open this line up? Is that possible? Oh, email. Oh, it's email. Never mind. Okay. Well, then we have a question about whether or not the foundation will consider job development initiatives for undocumented immigrants. And Francesca, you want to take this one?
Yes. The answer. We will.
Absolutely. Okay. And if folks want to call in, you can. Oh, we don't have anyone on the line. We also still have a little bit of time for additional questions by email. So either call or email, and we are happy to take those. We do have a question about whether we'll consider doing support for capital campaigns, and the answer is we will not. So capital campaign support will not be part of the upcoming opportunity in January. And then we have a question about our PLACE strategy in terms of how grants would support anchor institutions and strengthen community-based organizations, and whether these are capital grants, organization development, core operations. As I mentioned, we will not be supporting capital campaigns through the January opportunity. We will support organizational development opportunities, and we'll also support specific activities that anchor organizations may be involved in that are designed to advance equity both within neighborhoods and across the region. And then we have a question about whether we would be open to contributing to a housing subsidy for individuals who need temporary financial assistance while they wait for their first paycheck. And I would say unlikely that we would, but would need more details to see whether or not that actually would fit. And I'd encourage you to come back with that question after we post our guidelines to see whether or not you think it might be a match. Let's see. Then we have another question associated with how does organizing with low-income people of color, especially youth, for climate and ecological justice at the intersection of racial and economic justice figure into our new strategic vision? So, Myra, why don't you talk a little bit more about how organizing will be supported?
Yes, we're going to look at organizing efforts across sectors and across populations, and we're really trying to build the organizing infrastructure and the coalitions and alliances that support their work in the region. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, hopefully it does. It came in by email. So you can, if you have something you want us to clarify something, let us know. The second question from the same person is, how about support for cooperative economic development, specifically for low-income youth of color? I'd say possibly, and so, again, take a look at the guidelines and then ask questions at that point to see whether or not something is specifically on your mind once you take a look at how we're thinking about the grant making going forward. Then there's a question about I think this is a question about cohorts of organizations and whether or not organizations who are current grantees, whether or not they can also apply. And the answer is yes. If you're a current grantee, you can apply with a letter of intent. And if you are a group of organizations, you can also apply together as a collaborative. It will be up to you to decide the way you would like to access the grant process. And then we have a question about whether or not we support a national network with an Oakland base. And there I would say the question for us will be the impact for the region. We would not be looking to support a national network where we could not discern a clear impact in the region. And then finally, we have another question about our focus on the social determinants of health. And the question is, does that include support for case management or counseling for survivors of domestic violence or immigrants struggling to get a job, make ends meet, et cetera? We will not be supporting health services, and so to the extent that you're describing those will not be eligible for grant making. And then finally, there is a question about whether there is a grant-seeking path for news nonprofits who want to serve community information needs, and whether or not we'd be supporting journalism. And here I'd have to say it's going to depend on its connection to the people, place, or power pathways as to whether or not we would support that. Well, two final questions. One is, will our history as a grantee have weight in your decisions? Yes, your history will have weight in our decisions, although we also want to make sure that our doors are open for new grantees. So we will, of course, pay attention to those that we've had long time or even short time relationships with, and we'll be looking to develop some new ones as well. So we're just about at the end of our time today. I want to thank everyone again for joining us. As I mentioned, the entire call and the questions, as well as ones we couldn't answer, we will post all of that on our website. You can continue to use the VP programs at sff.org to ask us additional questions, to ask for clarifications, etc. And as we mentioned, we'll hold another call in November once our new guidelines are posted, and you will all receive notice of that as being participants on this call. And then we'll continue to keep you updated through the website and emails and posts so that we can communicate our progress as it happens and keep you informed about ways you can get engaged, apply for a grant, or participate in one of the Foundation's programs. We are really honored to be working with all of you as we seek to advance racial and economic equity across the Bay Area. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a nice afternoon.
This does conclude today's conference call.